Okay, final session of the day, which I will chair, and the reason I want to chair this is because for me this is what the whole conference is about. It's about creating a vision of a new Britain without Brexit, and it's really following up on, from me, what Jessica was saying in the last session. We've got to have a message which is going to work with the Leave voters and with the people in the middle, like Take Back Control. They've got that message. We talked about rebutting the message, but we didn't come up with a message of our own. We've got to be able to say to people, vote to remain in the European Union in a future referendum, and this is what you can have. This is what we can do. And they're going to say to us, yes, that's what I want. We've got to be able to do that. Otherwise, we're just going to be fighting a rearguard action to defend ourselves against the assault of the lies and misinformation of the Leave campaign again. So I'll introduce you to our panel. First on my right is Lord William Wallace. Lord Wallace is a Liberal Democrat peer. He actually, when he started in politics, he was at university, and I read this, he joined all 3 political clubs. Is that true? Before, which I suppose is a good way of doing it, and then decided that the Liberal Party was the one for him, and he was elected Vice President of the Cambridge University Liberal Club and later became its president. He started his career as a lecturer in the Department of Government at the University of Manchester. In the 1966 general election, he was the assistant press officer for the Liberal Party, and then he subsequently contested 5 parliamentary elections. I won't say what the outcome was of those. But he went on to great glory as a speechwriter for David Steele and as vice chairman of the Standing Committee, and he was also a co-author of the 1979 Liberal and 1997 Liberal Democrat election manifestos. He was created a life peer in 1995, taking the title, correct me if I'm wrong, Baron Wallace of Saltaire of Shipley in the county of West Yorkshire. Is that the official? Very good. Natalie Bennett, on my right, was born and raised in Australia, as some of you may know. She started as a journalist with regional newspapers in New South Wales before she moved to Thailand and then on to Britain, where she came in 1999. She joined the Green Party in 2006 when she lived in London and very quickly became the party's internal communications coordinator and then moved rapidly through the ranks to take over as leader of the party in September 2012. She led the party into the 2015 general election, where the Greens secured their highest ever number of votes at a general election. And then in 2016, she stood down and moved to Sheffield, where she now lives. On my left is Tessa Milligan. Sorry, Tessa, I don't know that much about you, but you can say it yourself. But Tessa is a spokesperson for Our Future, Our Choice, the campaign working for young people and getting young people interested in this debate, and very important that is too. And then on my left at the end is Neil Carmichael, our first, well, it's actually our second Conservative of the day, if you count Patrick. Neil, yes. No, it's right. It's most welcome, and it is so important that that we're all party, that Conservatives are welcome to these events. And if someone is prepared to stick his head above the parapet on this issue in a very hostile environment at the moment, that is very much appreciated. He is actually from Northumberland, I think. He was elected to Northumberland County Council in 1989, where he served for 4 years. During that time, he stood for the Conservatives in the 1992 general election, actually in the seat of Leeds East, so he has a connection with this place. In 1999, he moved to Gloucestershire, and he was selected to stand for the Conservatives in Stroud. Eventually, he won that seat in the 2010 election, and he held it until last year. Neil is a passionate pro-European, always has been. He's now chair of he was chair of the Conservative Group for Europe, and is now president of the recently formed campaign group Conservatives for a People's Vote. So thank you. Welcome to our panel.
Thank you.
So it is a challenging thing. I'm going to ask each of our panel, I hope they've got some good ideas about how do we create that vision that is going to win and win well with the public. I'll start with Lord Wallace.
Any part of our future vision has to be telling us ourselves and telling our children what sort of country we are and what sort of country we want to be. That means we've got to grapple with the identity issue. We've let the Leave campaign dominate the debate about identity. And indeed, the press tend to talk about identity politics as a right-wing, hard right thing which the rest of us should ignore. We've actually got to take it on. Don't forget, Theresa May was persuaded to say at one stage that the real divide in Britain is between the citizens of somewhere and the citizens of nowhere. And by citizens of nowhere, she meant anyone who likes dealing with foreigners and going abroad and regards themselves. A fairly nativist David Goodhart is the origin of that statement, and sort of nasty, inward-looking thing. I'm sure she didn't actually really understand what she meant by it, but there we are. The hard Brexiters are English nationalists, and maybe that's a phrase we should be using about them. They look back to a world which was dominated by England, as they used to call the British Empire in many ways then, and they'd like to bring it back. Boris Johnson talked about taking us back east of Suez and being a global power again, and we've just seen in the news yesterday what that leads to, the nonsense of a British ship sailing through contested Chinese territorial waters to demonstrate that we're really there up, we count in the world, when we've only got actually about 20 ships in the Navy anyway, so we can't do it very often. Playing at being a global power is their answer, so we have to project an alternative vision. And we have to talk about roots, national history, a national story. We have to talk about citizenship and what it means to be a British citizen and who is a British citizen. We need to talk about multiple identities as a desirable thing, not something that takes you into being a citizen of nowhere. And we also need to talk about war, peace, and security and how valuable those are. Let me start with acceptance of multiple identities. We are Yorkshire people, we are English, we are British, we are European, and we have all sorts of other dimensions. And that's something to be proud of. It's not like Tommy Robinson, that you're either British or nothing, and an awful lot of people living here are not British, but we have to put forward an alternative perspective in all of that. And the Yorkshire dimension is an important one here, which is why I'm an active supporter of the One Yorkshire proposal, because we are a desperately over-centralised country. England is the most centralised democracy in the world now. Local government is being weakened further. And we do need, therefore, to reopen the question of regional counterweights to the dominance of the South. So let's push our Yorkshire identity, which is not in contradiction to being English, British, European, and a global citizen. And let's also, as we begin to explore our roots further, remind us that most of us have multiple identities. I've been researching the First World War because I'm a member of the government's advisory committee on the commemoration of the First World War. I discovered Yorkshire had a substantial German population in 1914, and what happened to it? They all changed their names. Paul Colley, the professor of migration studies at Oxford, starts his latest book by saying that his grandfather lived in Bradford and was called Himmelweit, and in 1914 changed his name. So if we start to explore who the Mongol population of Yorkshire are in their full depth, that's a dimension that we shouldn't ignore. We need also to talk about the British Empire in different ways. I've fought very hard and not done very well in trying to get commemoration of the First World War to remind people of the contribution of the Indian Army, as large as the British Army in 1918, and a very high proportion of the Asian population now living in Britain have grandparents who fought in the Indian Army. in the First and Second World Wars. I keep asking people when I meet them what they know about their family, and it's quite remarkable because the British recruited Muslims, Sikhs, as the warlike races in India. So, and that takes me on to the question of the national story and our roots. Tim Garton-Ash once said, all the discussion on English history, British identity, is footnotes to Thatcher. Now, we're still regurgitating Mrs. Thatcher's feeling that World War II was the great point at which Britain stood alone against the world. The Spitfire was there with all of the UKIP literature. It's part of what comes out in the Leave campaign. Well, we just need to remind people, first of all, we weren't alone in 1940. After the British, the Poles provided the most pilots in the Battle of Britain. We had Belgians fighting with us still then. We had a whole host of people, including, of course, the whole of the Commonwealth and Empire. And we need to talk about a positive European history in which Britain has been a part. A.T. Grayling's already said about the extent to which British culture and European culture intertwine. The absence of a proper sense of how English history and British history fit in with European history is part of our problem. Historians for Britain were an important part of the Leave campaign. Historians for Europe did not exist. And that's part, again, of how we need to grab history teaching and citizenship teaching in our schools. Margaret Thatcher, in her last year as Prime Minister, tried to revamp the history syllabus and failed, happily. Michael Gove was just beginning to try to do the same thing when he was moved away from education. Well, we need to engage with that set of issues again and get away from history teaching in schools, which is dominated by the Nazis, the Russian Revolution, and other things which give us negatives about our neighbours. Citizenship and social inclusion. I think it was Madeline who said earlier that we don't teach citizenship education in schools. If you read the Daily Mail, which I do regularly because I need to know what the enemy is saying, you will know that all teachers are left-wing and lazy and don't work. Thus, political education is regarded by the Conservative press as a dangerous left-wing thing to do. We have to tackle citizenship education on a cross-party basis, and that is vital to teach all of our citizens what their rights and obligations are. We need to include those at the bottom, but we also need to remind those at the top, the businessmen who are now often so overpaid, that they are British and they have obligations to the rest of the British community. Lastly, we need certainly to talk again about security, war, and peace. Here we are about to commemorate the end of a war in which Britain lost several 100,000 of its young men, and which we fought and failed to make for peace across Europe. It came back to a Second World War. We think that's way in the past, could never happen again, but we saw how easily war can break out in Bosnia when the Cold War ended. We've seen the beginnings of right-wing nationalism coming up again. Europe is a peace project, and we should never take peace for granted. So our vision of the future has to be about who we are, who our fellow citizens are, the complexities of where we all come from, and how we share our future with our neighbours and others.
Thank you very much, Rod Wallace. And now I'll ask Natalie Bennett to speak.
Okay, I'm going to experiment with that so I can stand up and see people. I want to begin with a thank you to everyone here, because you are the inspiration for what I'm about to say. because I've been thinking today about how different the main Remain campaign was. And I had a limited amount of engagement with that. We mostly ran our own campaign. But how different it looked to how different this room looks. First of all, we're not in London. Second, we've heard from lots of different people from lots of different walks of life, and all of you here are out in communities from right across the north. You are people representing communities. You're not a few people like David Cameron and his friends telling the rest of the country what to do. And thirdly, you and the organisers of Leeds for Europe here have given us a final, as our chair said, crucial message that what we are about is about a new Britain. The campaign in 2016 was David Cameron and his friends saying, oh, it's all fine the way it is now, just leave things as they are. And I'm not at all surprised that that failed, because we were then, and even more and even worse now, in a Britain where people are struggling to put food on the table, keep a roof over their heads, where whole communities we know in the north are just clinging on economically by their absolute fingernails, with all of those empty shops, with all of those people trying to juggle 4 zero-hours contracts to make ends meet. And so I think Richard is right to say what is crucial about today is that we are not saying that stopping Brexit means going back to 2016 or even earlier. It means building a new Britain. And I would say there are 2 key words here. And those key words are democracy and security. Now, one of the things that we've all heard, and maybe sometimes even in the darker reaches of our mind thought, is, oh, you know, this democracy business, it didn't work out so well in 2016. But I would say that where we are now in Britain is absolutely a result of our lack of democracy. The 16 result came about because people wanted to take back control in their communities of their politics. And of course, in 2017, we had the perfect demonstration of how First Past the Post has denied people that control and why they were trying to seize it back in 16. Because in the 17 election, 68% of the votes did not count. Now, that's an electoral reform society figure, and this may be where I'm not sure, where I may disagree with my speaker on the right. We also have an unelected House of Lords. Okay, all right, you agree with me, that's good. I'm glad to hear it. And I was actually in the House of Lords, in the chamber, listening to the debate in the second when it was bounced back from the Commons about whether the Commons would have a meaningful vote or not. And I heard lots of people from the other side saying, well, this House can't go against the will of the Commons, you know, because we're not an elected House. These are people who will continue to defend the unelected House of Lords. Now, I've been going around England and Wales for the past 5 or 6 years, and for most of that time I was talking about how, you know, we need reform. People who've got very good eyesight might be able to see I've got a Make Votes Matter badge on here and saying make votes match seats. And I was saying, you know, we need to reform our democracy. But ultimately, one day I thought, hang on a minute. We have to say that Britain is not a democracy. And the first time I said that, I really thought, you know, ooh, I'm going to get some kickback from this. Someone in the room will go ballistic and the Daily Express will have a fit. But every room I've said it to, many different rooms up and down the country, I got the reaction I just got then. People going, yeah, you're right. So I would say the first thing we have to do is make Britain a democracy. And I'd pick up on what Lord Wallace said, is we have to make it a local democracy. We can't have all of the people of Britain telling Leeds, telling Rochdale what to do. They have to decide for themselves. And so I'd very much agree, and I'm involved in supporting the One Yorkshire campaign, except I have one point of disagreement with it, which is that I don't think we can have one elected mayor, one person to decide. We need a Yorkshire Assembly. So that democracy has to be real and it has to be local. And power should only be referred upward when it really needs to. Local people making decisions. Now, the second word that I identified as I think is crucial is security. Now, first of all, we've got to think about what that word security means. The right wing will tell us that security means we need more guns. Goodness help us. We need those nuclear weapons, and that will make us secure. We need an arms industry so we can sell the arms to Saudi Arabia. Well, I would say that we need to seize that word security back and say that security means a freedom from fear. And that means certainty that you can put food on the table, keep a roof over your head. And to deliver that, what we need is a redistribution of resources. There are enough resources in Britain for everybody to have a decent life. And this is where what Jessica said in the preceding session I think was really important, and I'm going to go away and look at more of what she's been doing because I think it is really important, is what we need to deliver on that is we need to make multinational companies and rich individuals pay their taxes and pay their workers properly. And this is where we get to the truly European dimension of this. Because as the people of Britain taking on what I call parasites like Amazon, companies that are sucking resources out of Britain and out of other countries and not paying back, we need to make them pay their fair share. And as the people of Britain, it's going to be damn hard to do that on our own. But we can do that with the peoples across Europe. Which is where this argument becomes circular, because as a Green, I've often been critical over the past 3 or 4 decades of what the EU has done. And it has too often acted as an agent for the multinational companies and the forces. But that's actually, unfortunately, been because what you might call neoliberalism or neo-Thatcherism has been the dominant political current for 30 or 40 years. And people were elected to Europe to make those decisions. So what we have to do is not change the institutions, but change the politics. We are going into the post-neoliberal age, and we need the resources of the EU, that social contract, to be defended for the new age of politics, a politics of the 99%, not the 1%. So to come back finally to our vision that I think we need to take out onto the streets, is we need everybody in this room, your friends, your work colleagues, your union colleagues, your classmates at school or university or college, to be talking to other people and sharing these ideas. As Madeline rightly said, there's a huge problem with the lack of education about politics. Now, one of the things I'd say is actually we don't just need to educate young people about politics, we also need to make our schools, colleges and universities far more democratic, because the best way to learn about democracy is to actually do it. But we need to deliver to everybody a message that politics should be something you do, not have done to you. And you can do that democratically through your local parish council, your local ward, your local council, through Westminster and through Brussels, when we have democracy. And then we can all deliver for everybody a security, a fair share of our world's resources. Thank you.
Okay, over to Tessa Milligan.
Yeah, as Richard pointed out, I don't have a very long list of impressive credits to my name.
I just sympathetic.
Thank you. I mean, I'm 20 years old. I work with Our Future, Our Choice and Women for Europe. And I'm not very good at coming up with catchy political slogans, and, you know, I'm not very good at that. But I have grown up essentially under austerity. I was 12 years old in 2010 when David Cameron came to power, and I do think that austerity essentially gave birth to the frustration which led to Brexit. And I agree with Natalie that we need serious economic reform in order to really tackle the problems that led to Brexit, tackle the problems which lead to the North and South divide and things like that. So I've got a sort of mad mind map of ideas. And they come under three different parts that all link together. And the first is constitutional reform. The second is education. And the third is investment in infrastructure and housing. For democratic reform, I think we need votes at 16. Don't tell me that I'm old enough to get married and pay VAT, but not old enough to have political representation. And as you said earlier, and has been said today, we do need a fully elected House of Lords. And it should be elected by a proportional representational system. And I think that should also be elected not once every 5 years, but once every 2.5 years. Because as has been mentioned today, a democracy ceases to be a democracy unless it can change its mind. And if the feeling is in the country during a parliamentary session that what we are getting is not what we want, we should be able to have a vote soon enough to be able to change something. And I think it would be good if that second chamber were elected at least partially regionally, so that people in regions like Yorkshire and the Humber and the Southwest and places which feel left behind by Westminster, and also Scotland and Northern Ireland, so that we have people in government who don't make the mistake like Karen Bradley, are in a position where they don't understand the basic politics of where they're meant to be representing. And I also echo what Maddie said earlier about the state of political education in our schools. And if I asked my friend, I'm pretty much fresh out of school, if I asked my friends what a constitution was, I think 75% of them wouldn't be able to tell me what that word even means, let alone tell me what sovereignty means or what democracy truly means. So I think we need political education. Our students should be leaving our schools knowing how our judicial system works, knowing how our electoral system works, knowing what parliamentary democracy is, understanding our relationship with the European Union so that years later they are not able to be manipulated by people like Nigel Farage and slogans which are like, oh, they're all faceless bureaucrats that we don't elect, because that's just not true. And I think another part of education is the fact that our workforce, our NHS, will collapse if we Brexit. And that is because this government has neglected education and training to go into those kind of jobs for years. And so I think a big part of that is also teaching our students that we don't just value degrees and university because it is drilled into you at school, but that is somehow the only way you can be successful. We need to teach our students that vocational skills are incredibly valuable, that transferable skills are incredibly valuable. And I think we need to expand the number of apprenticeships that we have available to young people. And also, can we please pay our apprentices national minimum wage and not $3.70 an hour? Because that actively discourages this nation's young from going into those kinds of industries. And they are some of the fastest growing industries in the UK. Things like construction, things like social care, engineering, healthcare. I mean, a lot of my dad's friends work in construction, and for the first time in their lives, after 40 years worth of working in the industry, they are now saying that they are building houses that they themselves would never be able to afford to live in. So the third part is an investment in infrastructure and housing. We need affordable housing. We need to, I think, expand and rebrand council housing, remove the stigma. These are, for many people, homes for life. And council housing, in an age where the housing ladder and the housing market has changed so significantly in the last few decades, we need to think about how we can create an affordable stepping stone to permanent housing for people like me. My cousin, just in the last few months, aged 39, just bought a flat. Before that, they were renting because it is so difficult to find somewhere affordable to live. So we need to start building affordable housing, and not just in the southeast, because I'm from the southeast, as you could probably tell from my voice. And I live in a town just outside of London. I live in the home counties, and there is housing being built, but it is not affordable. There is a tower block right near my house which was refurbished into apartments about 10 years ago, and it is still half empty because no one can afford to live there. Another part of this, which links back to democracy and making sure that people in places like Leeds feel represented, feel connected to the rest of the UK. And I think a huge part of that comes under transport links. It's very difficult for me to get to Leeds without going into London first, if you live in a home county or if you live in the southeast, because it's like spokes on a wheel. You have to go in order to go back out. And I think when I buy a travel card to go into London, I get public transport all compacted into one card that I can then use in between zones 1 to 6 all day or all week if I buy a week-long one. And I think we need to do that for the regional parts of the UK as well. We need a kind of transport for the southwest, transport for the northeast, which is locally and regionally run, which encourages people to use public transport. And we can expand our transport links between different regions, not just between London and the rest of the UK, which will make people in the UK feel more connected to each other. I have a random quote here from that weird Kevin Costner film, "If you build it, they will come." And I think we should be thinking about that in our cities that aren't just London. Cities like Leeds, cities like Manchester, Hull, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Exeter, Bristol, Canterbury are huge, could be huge cultural hubs. They are of huge cultural significance to the UK in arts, in various different industries, and I think we should focus on expanding them. I think that's it.
Very quickly.
Okay, and our final speaker is Neil Carmichael.
Well, I too am going to stand up. Coming from the north, I've always stood up whenever I needed to make a speech. Richard, I want to thank you very much for mentioning my fledgling start in Leeds as a parliamentary candidate. In those days, I wasn't married, and I ended up with a girlfriend who was a Liberal Democrat. That was the first surprise. And secondly, she worked at BBC Leeds because she came to interview me, and I liked her so much, I asked her to come and do it again. So I think you can actually work with the media. And I think it's a really important point. Kicking the messenger doesn't help. Working with the media does. And it's all about getting our message right. It's about understanding what we are trying to do. And it reminds me of a second thing I did in Leeds, which was not involving a girl, but actually Ted Heath. I wanted him to come and support my campaign because I wanted my constituency to know that I myself was absolutely committed to the European Union, and I wanted the people of Leeds to understand just what goodness came from the European Union. So let's remember, whatever disagreements we have about policies within the European Union, we should defend the European Union and promote the European Union. It's absolutely central to this argument. Because you know what it's like? If you were buying a car and you went to a salesman and said, well, I've got a car, but it's not a very good car. The battery's flat, there's a flat tyre, a steering wheel wobbles. What are you going to do? Are you going to buy that car? No. So if you hear a politician telling you about this is wrong with the European Union, that's wrong with the European Union, or even starting a speech off with, I am a Europe skeptic, do you think the electorate is then going to suddenly lunge forward and start supporting the European Union? No. What we have to do is have the leadership, the leaders, and the vision to explain precisely what it is about the European Union that matters to us and the reasons why we want to be in the European Union. It's dead easy to think of a good slogan. I've just come up with one myself. Working together for a better future through the European Union. What can be more simple than that? So what do we do post this disagreeable time, and hopefully one which we reverse? Do you know what the real problem is with this country? And most speakers have actually touched upon it. But the real problem is we don't care enough about our people. We don't care enough about our young people. We think they're a commodity and not a real resource, not a real value to us as a group and to our country as an outfit. Think of Finland or South Korea that were both ruined by war. Finland attempted by the Nazis and then the communists, so they must have been absolutely fed up by the time 1945 came along. And then South Korea, another disaster zone because of the terrible war during the early 50s. But what did both countries do? They knew they didn't have any raw materials of any description. What they did know was that they had people. And what they could do was make those people into intelligent, articulate, capable individuals. That's why today, Finland and South Korea are top of the tables in PISA or thereabouts. That's why today they both have economies which are characterized by what I think is a central requirement for this country, which is a high-skilled, high-paid workforce. So that is what we need to do. That is the central message. Because during the referendum campaign, I heard about people coming to take jobs, I heard about people with no skills, I heard about this, that and the other. What I never really heard, and I never really felt was part of the story, was what we were going to do ourselves to solve those problems in this country. That's what it's about. It's about taking responsibility as well. Now, I think that is fairly central. It is why I've taken on the job of chairing the Commission for Work-Life, it's a long title, Work-Life and in a Changing Economy for the Pearson Group. I thought I'd get there eventually. And we're going to make several recommendations. I can't say exactly what they are. But what they will definitely be about are the people not going to Oxford and Cambridge. They'll be about the people who are starting life off in difficult circumstances, and they'll be about people in a sort of 16, 17-year-old area thinking about vocational training, thinking about what kind of jobs they want to do, thinking about the experiences that they need to have in education and in careers. Those are the things we need to think about. Do you know why? Because we are, in terms of economic productivity, way down the list. We are 28% less productive than the Germans. So what do people say? Well, the Germans always export things to China, but we don't because we're in the European Union. An absolute stupid comment. Because Germany's been in the European Union longer than we have. But the other interesting point is, of course, Germany can export more because they are more productive. That's the sort of discussion we need to be having, not yapping on about some completely wrong misunderstanding about the European Union. So let's get the argument put into place. Now, the other thing that we've got to do as a country is understand that technology is coming along. And it always comes along with usually lots of benefit. I like the story of President McKinley, who was sitting in the Oval Office. He was assassinated, but not before this happened, obviously. He was looking for savings in the federal government, and so his Secretary of the Treasury was instructed to go and find some solutions. And he came back, he said, well, Mr. President, we're going to abolish the Patents Office. And McKinley apparently said, why on earth would you want to do that? Well, he said, we've got the repeater light rifle, we've got the telegraph, and we've got the steam engine. We just don't think there's anything left to invent. Well, the same characteristic is about our economy of the future. People are talking about artificial intelligence and robots moving jobs and so on. What we need to do is stop worrying about that and start thinking about how our young people are actually going to use these technologies to their advantage, to our economy's advantage, and to our society's advantage. That's what we need to be doing. So in short, it is stop listening to all the stuff you read in the newspapers and start altering the message itself. And that's about having the right kind of leaders in place to make sure we sell that message and we are clear about it and we repeat it time and time again. And let me just repeat it again. It is not about what comes out of the European Union that we should be arguing about. It's what the European Union stands for. It stands for internationalism. It stands for economic cooperation. It stands for efficient trade. It stands for protecting the environment. It stands for opportunities for young people. Those are the things we talk about, not the niggly bits that local government could easily be responsible for, let alone the European Union. And then the next big message is to understand what the real problem is in this country. It is that misunderstanding, that lack of appreciation of our young people, of our people as a whole. We all have something to contribute. That's what we've got to get across. And our education system has to be redefined to make sure that happens. And last but not least, since we're in Leeds and I'm from Newcastle, and I completely agree with Tessa about London. Incidentally, that's Henry VII's fault. Because when he beat the Yorks, what he actually effectively decided to do was centralise this country on London. And he famously went around killing noblemen if they had a private army. Now, that kind of thing was probably done in 1490s, but it should not stop us thinking now about effectively creating leaders of our cities, leaders of our counties, who can and must understand those local problems and come up with the solutions and really get it about the value of the people that are in their communities, working in their communities, serving their communities. These are the things that should be at the heart of our future Britain. The way to do it is make sure we are still in the European Union, but with a vision which is clear, open, decent, and constantly repeated.
I will just say, can we please have more Conservatives like that? We're really running late, so I think I'm going to keep maybe just one round of questions. Is that okay? It's a question of whether you want to ask lots of questions or whether you're getting tired. So I'll take one round, then we'll go on to the final thing of the day. So, any questions? Okay, we'll take that one in the middle, and is that it? Okay, just the two then, that's great.
Hi, I'm Caroline Anstey. I'm a small business owner in Home Firth, and I cannot understand how the Tory party can support Brexit because it's killing small businesses. The Tories are meant to be the party of business, but what they've done to us in small businesses is unforgivable, and I just don't understand where their support is coming from. They are alienating their natural supporters.
Who was the other one? Can you hold your hand up?
Hello, I just want to first of all thank the panel. I think in this final discussion, certainly, it was far more inclusive, and I really valued the discussion around citizenship. One thing I have noticed that there doesn't appear to be many people of my hue in the audience. And I think we're possibly missing a trick in terms of engaging our ethnic minorities. Yes, the discussions around Europe and how we can promote a positive message around Europe. And yes, the key thing is how the EU citizens are being impacted. But I think with the hostile environment, some of the other issues that have come out of the Home Office, we need to engage ethnic minorities as well. I think there's a case to be made there. I just wondered how the panel think we can possibly do that, because the grassroots organisations are fantastic. I applaud everyone who's donated so much of their time to this cause. But nevertheless, there are places where, even in Leeds, for example, where we've got almost silos of ethnic communities, which, just like the working class British or English communities that we're referring to that are feeling left behind, there are pockets and silos of ethnic minority communities that potentially are equally being left behind, and that could be the next issue. So while we're focusing on that element, that there's also some engagement, I think, to be done there as well. Thank you.
Okay, let's take responses to that, and let's be brief because the time is nearly up. Do you want to start, Lord Wallace?
I agree strongly on the ethnic minorities. Saltaire, as you know, is on the edge of Bradford, so we're very conscious of how we need to engage with them. And I think a lot of my battle in commemorating World War I has been about trying to get the government to accept that we weren't fighting it on our own. I found myself in Grassington last summer in a bookshop where the bookseller was just saying, well, we beat the Germans in 2 world wars, didn't we? And now they're telling us what to do. And I said very quietly, well, actually, the Americans gave us a bit of help. And he said, well, they weren't in World War I, were they? No, the level of ignorance, I'm very sorry that we have not given as much attention to the role of the Indian Army, the role of the West Indies Regiment, the Chinese Labour Corps, all of those things that we did. And that's part of how we need to persuade our history. One of the things that's pretty much buried is that England had a quite significant black population in 1800, which had disappeared into the general population by 1900, so there were quite a few people walking around who have, as the old and improper saying goes, got a touch of the tar brush that they don't know about. Well, we're all Mongols. We should be celebrating that. But in the middle of the referendum campaign, I was talking in Ripon Cathedral with the bishop on the issues to be at stake, and I spoke about the whole immigration issue and how we need to reconsider it. And actually, we've got to consider who is my neighbor, as the Bible says. And he came back after the break, and one of the discussion groups said, well, our group has been discussing who is not my neighbor. Now, there's a fundamental identity issue that we all better get out into the open and start talking to each other across different groups about.
Caroline, first of all, I think what you're seeing is an impact of what I was talking about Britain not being a democracy, which has forced all of our politics into two parties, two groups, which are extremely disparate. As we've seen here just now, the Tory party is a very, very broad church, and so is the Labour Party. But the Tory party has been in the hands of the champions of big business. And in fact, what I had written in my notes that I ran out of time for was talking about, we've got these parasitical multinational companies that the government's acting for, and what they're doing is squashing small business. Amazon has put not just bookshops, but shoe shops, clothes shops. It's trying to put the supermarkets out of business and just take it all for itself, and the Tories are acting in their interest. The Leavers are acting in their interest. And on the second point, I think it's really crucial when we're thinking about this vision of a new Britain. We have to absolutely say, we've already heard how Theresa May's hideous hostile environment has already started to impact on EU citizens who live here, and we've heard from some of them here. But we actually have to absolutely say our vision of a new Britain utterly gets rid of the hostile environment for people from anywhere in the world. And I think I've had people say to me, people from BAME backgrounds have said to me, and I can hear and see why the arguments are, why should it be that my grandma from the Indian subcontinent has been denied the right to come here, but anyone from Europe can do what they like? And of course, part of the answer to that is this is a mutual thing. Anyone from Britain can go anywhere in Europe that they like. That's one answer. But the other answer is, of course, that we actually want the grandma from India to be able to come here too. But I actually heard a speaker at an event where I was debating Lexiters in Manchester in 2016. And she was a young woman from a South Asian background with an uncertain immigration status. And so she was the most powerful person to say this. She said, I don't want my immigration status to be uncertain. I should have the right to be here. But I don't think that denying and taking away rights from people from the rest of the EU is going to improve my situation. Denying and restricting rights is not going to improve things for other people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the inclusivity, and I think that people who are an ethnic minority are often not at the forefront of political campaigning because they don't have the upward social mobility that should be available to them to be able to be represented in politics. And one of the big things that we often talk about at Women for Europe is the loss or the watering down of fundamental rights if we leave the European Union. And that includes gender equality rights, rights in the workplace, and the watering down those rights often hit women, and the women who are hit the most by that are women who are also ethnic minorities. And also migrant women applying for citizenship rights here, women are more likely to be in part-time work and therefore may not qualify for citizenship rights and things like that. So I think you make a really important point, basically, and I think we need to find a way to make, especially the people's vote, especially against a Brexit campaign where xenophobia and racism was used to win the vote, is so important in combating that. And also on the point about business, I think that's part of the North-South divide, because local business is local people and local development. And I completely agree with you. I mean, what has the Tory party is meant to be the party of business. And as Natalie said, it has become the party of big tax dodging business and not the party of local entrepreneurs. And I think all of our political parties should value local businesses, because that is what makes the UK outside of London thrive.
Well, I agree with the two questioners. I think that it's absolutely right that Brexit in any shape or form is going to be bad news for small businesses, or indeed any business. And I think that is something that needs to be clearly understood. The only point I would make is I do wish some of our small businesses grew into slightly bigger ones, but that is in part inadequate government policy, and certainly I think a call for a review of what a business actually is in terms of contract law and in terms of our description of a firm, and especially a review on the way in which banking operates for small businesses. And I think that's something we do need to really look at. As for the other question, first of all, I'm from Northumberland, so I expect most people will realise I'm a Viking. Secondly, I think most importantly, this is really a question about attitude. This is a question of how we behave in our lives, in our structures, in our agencies, or whatever it is we're behaving in. I've never really liked bundling groups of people up and saying, well, that's that group and that's another group. I don't like identity politics to that extent. What I do think is really important is that in a liberal democracy in which we still live, it's absolutely essential that we learn to treat and respect people properly, no matter where they come from, no matter what they do, and no matter what their thoughts are. We've got to understand that
risk. Julie just wants to say something. Do you? Roving mic, please.
I had a lot of space to talk earlier, so I don't, but I think there's maybe a couple of things that I feel haven't been addressed during today. Maybe they're addressed in panels I wasn't in. But with regards to this whole business of democracy and the campaign and the vote and the subsequent revelations about the data mining, about Cambridge Analytica, about Facebook, about big data, how our data was stolen, I think we have to keep talking about, because for me, this is not democracy. I mean, I feel that what happened was such a poor process that you couldn't actually respect it. I found it very difficult. I mean, I never said I respected it. I couldn't bear to say those words because it was such an appalling campaign. And if you shut out of the process the three main groups of people who are going to be impacted by the decision at the end of the day, for me, that's not democracy. But I think I would like people to continue alongside doing everything else that we're doing. We have to keep talking about how our democracy was undermined by interference from Russia and by very dark forces, was funded by dark money. And There's maybe just a little bit of information. I do democracy, I'm a MEP, I spoke earlier, and I do democracy support for the European Parliament. It means I do election observation in fragile democracies. And I was an election observer in Kenya. And exactly the same things that have happened here and in America, and the undermining and the interference with the presidential elections in France as well, that happened in Kenya. 1 week before the elections, the head of the Electoral Board's digital unit was found murdered in dodgy circumstances. And 1 week after the elections, the Supreme Court annulled the results. Now that's Kenya for you, right? Why aren't we taking to court? Why aren't we really pursuing the whole illegality and the undermining of our democracy?
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. So I'd like to thank very much this panel, Lord Wallace, Natalie, Tessa, and Neil. Thank you a lot.
Right. Oh, well done.
So I will introduce you to our final speaker. I was speaking to him earlier. He was in Plymouth yesterday. He left Plymouth about 1 o'clock in the morning to get a coach to London, and then he came from London to here. He really should be asleep in bed, but his job is going to be to energize you guys and to leave you uplifted. And he promises me that he still has that energy to convey to you. It is the one and only Femi Oluwole.
Yeah, I caught after leaving Plymouth at 1 in the morning, I caught the 8 o'clock bus from London to here. I'm a walking advert for Red Bull right now. So clearly politics in the last couple of years has just been a great place to be. It's been such a nice environment with no real disagreements, everybody getting along. And it actually made me think about Ricky Gervais. He once, and I'm going to steal his joke now, he said that British people, when we go abroad, we'll go to a restaurant in France and we'll say, do you have chips? They'll look confused and they'll say, do you have chips? And then if that doesn't work, you smash the place up, content in the knowledge that you've tried your best. That's the attitude that we tend to have. We speak our language. We often speak in the terms that are most dear to us. We'll try and convince people based on the things that we hold dear. That's not how language works. You have to speak a language that the other person actually understands. Now, it doesn't mean one language is wrong and one language is right, but you have to speak a language that actually works. So if you, and you're not going to like this, if you go to somebody who is very, very nationalistic, someone who feels that the EU has caused major problems and the EU is a problem, and you go at them waving the stars in their face, the Union Jack flag, the EU flag, they consider that to be an invading force. That's not how you do this, because they haven't made the connection that you made. It doesn't mean the same thing to them that it means to you. They don't see that the reason why we love that flag is precisely because we love the Union Jack. They don't realize that the reason why we love that flag is because we love every single part of the United Kingdom. That it is out of patriotism that we want to be in the EU, because we, like them, want a strong United Kingdom. But we have to speak their language. We have to speak the language of sovereignty. Again, they couch it in terms of sovereignty. We couch it in terms of the idea that we should have a say in the laws of Europe, that we shouldn't simply be on the outside looking in, that we should have an influential role to play. And when we both realize that we actually both want the UK to be as powerful and influential as possible, then we realize that the direction that Brexit's currently going is not in anybody's favor. Something that leaves us copying the rules of the EU but not having any say in it. That is not what Brexit voters... In fact, I've spoken to Brexit voters who call that disgusting. But that's the direction we're heading. If you speak the same language as somebody, surprise, surprise, communication works. But, I mean, language is one of those things as well, because it's something that also needs to get fixed, because we have this attitude of everybody speaks English anyway. And one of the problems with that is, of course, you're going to see other people from other countries as a problem or an invading force, because if you don't have that capacity to realize that other languages actually mean something, then you're going to see them as talking heads, as these funny people that make funny sounds. And that's got to be a problem. We have to have a more outward-looking country. And we have to recognize that we have more in common than we have apart. Because if you look at the Hillary-Trump campaign, same with the Brexit campaign, both sides of that debate thought that the other side was actively trying to destroy the country. That wasn't true. But that's the impression that we got. Because we didn't recognize that we all wanted the best for the country, but we just simply went about it in different ways. We kept calling each other uneducated. Just wrong. Because I promise you right now, I cannot say hand on heart that if I had not studied EU law, that I would not have voted leave. Why? Because that was an issue of the single market. I know it's a term that's annoying to use because most people don't know what it is. On both sides of the divide. Most people, probably in this room, still think it's free movement of people plus free trade. Whereas, in fact, it's a system that lets you make a single version of your product, and it's legal across the board, which means you can sell it cheaper. That just hasn't entered the public debate. So if you don't know what the single market is, how can you make a decision as to whether or not it's okay to leave it or not? But yet we still call Brexit voters uninformed or uneducated. That was wrong. So of course they didn't like that. Of course the dialogue was broken. These are not our enemies. These are people who want the exact same things as we do, but they thought that one thing was going to lead to what they wanted, and we thought that another thing would. But the fact is, we paint each other as enemies. They're not what you think they are. Because the reason why we feel that why that narrative comes into, that we treat them all as racist or stupid or blah, 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 is because those are the people that get the media attention. One of the great things about doing what we've been doing at Our Future, Our Choices, we've been actually going out into the country and speaking to people who voted for Brexit. We don't like being in London. We try and get out of there as much as possible. Personally, I hate being in London. I have asthma. The air there is constituted primarily of mud. I don't want to be there. I want to go to the places that voted for Brexit because those are the places that have been left behind. Those are the places that desperately need change. And I asked them what they wanted. And they wanted reasonable things, like for Westminster to give a crap for once. Now that's absolutely reasonable. That is not a Nigel Farage-esque fantasy about getting rid of immigrants. That is genuine concern because of the lack of investment in their area. Now, if we treat people like that, as if they're scum or as if they're stupid, of course the dialogue is going to be broken, and we will get nowhere. But you have to look at where we are from a global perspective. There are 4 big blocks of power in the world. There's China, the EU, Russia, and the US. Big groups, major influence. And if you look at the EU, both Trump and Putin want the EU to break apart. Is it any coincidence that two of the other massive blocks in the world would prefer it if one of those blocks broke up into smaller, more vulnerable chunks? Division is weakness. Similar to why I don't buy into the idea that Trump is Putin's puppet, but I do buy into the idea that Putin wanted Trump in there. Why? Because a divided America is a weaker America. And it's the same thing here. Brexit has weakened this country. There's a reason why the EDL, they go up to places like Sunderland, and they tap into that deep anger, that justifiable anger that the political establishment does not care. And they tap into that and point the finger at minorities, at immigrants. But we don't have a country that works for everybody. And one of the reasons why that happens is a broken political system. PR is necessary. Some version of PR is necessary. First past the post. I mean, I grew up mainly in Bromsgrove. My constituent, my MP, Sajid Javid. So my vote has never counted. And quite simply, as we heard earlier, many votes in this country don't actually count. So of course people felt like they weren't being listened to, because they literally weren't. And as for, again, I go back to Sunderland, because I was there recently. Safe Labour seat. So, and Conservatives never really get a look in. As a result, Labour knows they don't need to invest there, because there's no political incentive for them to invest there. Tories know they're never getting in. Again, no political incentive. And so all they get is a factory which Brexit is set to close down. Tough luck. So, I mean, I had a friend, I had some German friends coming over recently, and they visited Belfast, and they saw the wall that was there, and they were just shocked that we would risk making that worse. And they were shocked at the political propaganda they could see in Wetherspoons with the beer mats that say free trade equals cheaper beer. And historically, the fact that Germans are coming over here complaining about and pointing out that we have crossed the line in terms of propaganda and walls that divide cities, be afraid. But, I mean, you've got to look to Germany. We have a country that is very, very bottom-heavy in terms of investment, in terms of opportunities, in terms of money, in terms of wealth. And that's not fair. And as I mentioned, division is weakness. One of the reasons why Germany is such a powerhouse is because the industry is not in Berlin. That's where the politics is. The industry is completely decentralized. The banking sector is in Frankfurt. The industry, manufacturing is in the Ruhr. If you spread it out and make it so that everybody in the country has opportunities to reach their full potential, the country as a whole does better. But if we have a country like we have right now, where opportunities and jobs and infrastructure and investment goes to everywhere within the M25 and a couple of other places around the country, then London itself was also choked by the high population and the massive costs. And you're telling people in Sunderland, no, don't worry, Nissan factory, that's your level. That's your level. That's all you need. And people don't reach their potential, and that creates anger. And it's simply not efficient. So the country as a whole does worse because you've decided to handicap half of the population. Now, populism. Populism, it's a big misdirect, because you've heard that Brexit is this class war, and that they keep pointing out the elites, the political establishment, the elite, the corporate bigwigs with their money in the high rises. The populist politicians, they keep going on about that, but their policies never actually attack those people. They never actually say, yes, it's the political establishment, it's the elites, so let's increase corporation tax. Let's tax the rich. No, they point the finger at the political elites and the corporations, but they only ever attack people who are already at the bottom. They attack minorities, they attack immigrants. They make the people at the bottom fight amongst themselves so they don't look at the people at the top. That's how populism works. And when they finally get something that they want, Nigel Farage actually said the words, Brexit was never going to solve any of our domestic problems. I mean, come on. And Kate Hopkins recently, when I pressured her on how does Brexit help poor people, it gives them a feeling that their country belongs to them. It gives them a sense of hope that the country that their grandfather fought for. I mean, come on. Literally, does that put food on the table? They don't care, and they just make the division even worse. So that populism is just a cancer in this country. But it's our fault. It's the fault of the left. The rise of the right is 100% the fault of the left. Because, like I said, Labour's had a safe seat in Sunderland for a very long time. Nothing's changed. In 40 years, since Thatcher destroyed it, nothing's changed. But if we actually had a country that actually cares about the actual whole of the country, maybe we could actually make some progress. And the narrative that we get is that immigrants are the problem because we want people at the bottom to fight amongst themselves. We never hear about how citizens from other EU countries make up 5% of our population and 10% of our doctors, that our NHS desperately needs them. We never hear that citizens from other countries are net contributors to this economy, and that they contribute more to public services than they take away. We never hear that. But it's easy to make the people at the bottom fight amongst each other. Now, if there are issues regarding immigration in terms of competition or undercutting, then the government has the power to deal with that by passing laws to stop those companies from undercutting and exploiting workers. Do you know why I know they can do that? Because the EU just passed a law to make that happen. The EU passed the Posted Workers Directive, which means that you can't employ services from other countries to undercut workers locally, because the EU has actually listened. Now, that's a problem that can be fixed and needs to be fixed continuing in the future, otherwise we will still have these problems. Now, there is cause to be hopeful, because our society is heading in the right direction. There's a reason why we are more dependent on technology than any generation before us. It's in everything we do. It's in our phones, it's in our laptops, literally our entire lives. So that dependency, that reliance, that trust of expertise is growing. The generation that voted for Remain is the exact same generation which, due to the timing of the Maastricht Treaty, has only ever known an adult identity of being both a British and an EU citizen. That is a change, a categorical change, that won't be undone by the passing of time. It only gets a wider gap. So we'll be more and more pro-European, pro-internationalist as time goes on. But the fact is, Brexit is stopping that. We need hope. It's not enough to say Brexit is going to take away your money, your livelihood, your job. That's not enough. Because these are people who have been told by politicians for decades that this might make you richer, this might make you poorer. And they never believed it because nothing gets better. They need hope. They need time, investment, money in their areas to actually improve their lives. And Brexit right now is sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Because is the government focusing on fixing the NHS? Are they focusing on building houses? Are they focusing on fixing the broken electoral system? No. They've employed 7,000 civil servants to deal with Brexit, with plans for 9,000 more and several hundred to deal with immigration. Why not doctors? Why not teachers? Why not people to deal with building houses? Brexit is taking... We need hope, and Brexit is stealing it from us, from them. Now, one of the large reasons why we do this is because we want to avoid anger. Because can you imagine the anger that parts of the country that have been left behind for 40 years promised, finally, that their vote would make a difference and actually bring about genuine hope and genuine improvement? And Brexit only makes it worse. The anger will tear this country apart. But what we need to do is we need that people's vote. We need to stop Brexit. But as I keep saying, if you want to stop Brexit so that we can return to the status quo, you do not deserve to stop Brexit. Because we need to actually fix this country. The energy that we're all putting into stopping Brexit right now, we need that exact same energy to fixing this country after Brexit is stopped. Otherwise, it would be unforgivable because it means we've heard the cries of people who have been left behind, who have suffered, and who've done nothing just because we got our way. That would be unforgivable. So we need to pull together. We need to reach out. We need to find that common ground and recognize that these people are not your enemy. These people are people who want this country to be a successful, powerful, and prosperous country. And we need to work together to build that future and come together. A union, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi. And thank you all. That's it for today. So let's do it again sometime. And please keep going. Keep fighting.